lights are bright.
Line drive right field, base hit. South Carolina wins the College World Series.
The pressure is real.
Shot clock at 10. Murray against Davis. Lobs down low for Sharp, and he has a shot rejected by Murray Boyle. He just blocked the shot of a 7'5" human. Are you kidding me?
And the stories are bigger than the scoreboard.
And South Carolina has won the national championship.
From the biggest plays.
Up in the pocket, gonna run inside the 20, 10. Lenore Sellers going left side, 5. Touchdown, Carolina. Touchdown. Touchdown, Lenore Sellers.
To the toughest call.
In the pocket, rolling right side, throws underneath. Is the ball picked up?
Got it.
It is. The Gamecocks have got it on a turnover. They shut it down at Death Valley.
To the moments everybody will be talking about tomorrow morning.
Michigan at the 41. What a hit. Ball's free. On the ground. South Carolina deserves to have it, and they do.
This is the podcast that brings you inside the game. Now, here's your host, Keith Allsep. And this is Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for June the 10th. This is episode number 2023, and we have got a great show on tap for today. In just a couple of minutes, we will be joined by the Dean of Gamecock coverage, and in particular, Gamecock baseball coverage, John Whittle from Gamecocks 247. We will discuss the pending hire or the imminent hire of Kevin Schnall. Just has to be made official. We will go inside the search. We will talk about Kevin Schnall, what to expect from him, his coaching style, his demeanor, who could join Matt Williams, the pitching coach, who is coming back to South Carolina, the 2025 the Baseball National Assistant Coach of the Year. That's big. Who could fill out the staff, and then we will get into the players. Obviously, South Carolina has to build a roster. In the second half of the show, we will be joined by Alex Jones, also of Gamecock 247. And we will discuss all things Gamecock football related. The summer of Shane. Been some bumps on the road, a few potholes, but still a lot of really good players. The Gamecocks have 2 official visit weekends on tap, beginning this weekend, June the 12th, and then next weekend, June the 19th. Many priority targets still to visit, but off the top, let's go down to the capital city, to Forest Acres, the beautiful backyard of John Whittle from Gamecock 247. I'm sure his dog is excited about the imminent hire of Kevin Schnall that just needs to be made official. John, I got to give it to you. From Saturday, March the 21st, when this went down, I was in Las Vegas. You were covering South Carolina and Arkansas. You mentioned Kevin Schnall would listen to South Carolina. You've had Kevin Schnall against the field. You said you would take Schnall all along, and now it has come to fruition. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just happy that the program has a pretty clear direction now of where it's going and what it's doing. You're not waiting on a guy to retire. You're not going to have the same kind of – and the dogs are excited. I don't know if you hear them chasing each other. And you're going to have some stability there in a clear direction. And, you know, Mark Kingston was here for a long time, but it was a revolving door of coaches. And I think we're going to see some stability in this program for the first time in quite a while, and I think that's a big part of being able to find some success.
No doubt. So when Paul Maneri was dismissed, resigned, retired, whatever you want to call it, he got a parting gift. We didn't know how the landscape would play out by June. If there would be other jobs that could be considered as good or better than South Carolina that would be open. But as luck would have it for Jeremiah Donati, this was the perfect year for a coaching search because South Carolina was clearly the best college baseball job on the market. And he was able to take his time. Ultimately, I think they got the guy that was the front runner all along. But because South Carolina was the only job, there was a lot of interest. Can you take us inside the search? And, obviously Skylar Mead's name started to gain momentum. Now he's taking his team to Omaha. Dan Fitzgerald from Kansas, they kind of got boat raced in their super regional by Oklahoma. Steve Sabins from West Virginia and Scott Forbes from North Carolina, all names that were mentioned, as well as Josh Holliday from Oklahoma State. Can you take us inside? I mean, how serious was Scott Forbes really a serious candidate for this job?
Well, first of all, to kind of address all of that, I don't want this to come off in any kind of negative way and try to make things sound easy. But, I mean, this search for a baseball coach could not have set up much better for Jeremiah Donati. I mean, you look at it, forget about there not being any better jobs in South Carolina. There weren't really any other jobs, period, that were out there, because you never know, maybe one of your candidates has a particular connection with another school and it just happens to randomly. But, I mean, South Carolina wasn't competing for anything. NC State's the only other school that really came open, and that wasn't really open. Chris Hart was promoted when
Right.
Elliott Avent retired, and that's been something that's been in the works for a half a dozen years. So, there really weren't any jobs that were open that would even threaten the Gamecocks. I mean, Grand Canyon was out there, and, there's probably another small job or two out there, but there really weren't any jobs, forget any that really looked like South Carolina. So that was a very easy bit of it for Jeremiah. And then, having a guy who wants your job, who was right down the road, very familiar with everything, just went to a College World Series championship series last year. It made this thing, again, it comes off as sounding disrespectful. And I don't want to say it made his job easy, but you couldn't ask for a much better scenario if you're Jeremiah to be able to make a great hire. That being said, there were certainly some other candidates who were in the mix who they wanted to vet. You mentioned them. Steve Sabins. I mean, and credit to Jeremiah Donati too. Like, he had all the right names, in my opinion, out there and who were on his list. I mean, he had some great guys on that list, and there were some in past searches that I just wasn't enamored with at all. But this group, by and large, was really good. I wasn't infatuated with Todd Interdonato for various reasons. I wasn't infatuated with Josh Holliday or Kirk Sarloos for various reasons. But, those aren't bad coaches. Those weren't guys who you just scratch your head and be like, why is he even talked about? So he had a heck of a list. Dan Fitzgerald, there's going to be a little bit more reporting on this from me and some more behind the scenes on some of these other candidates here in the coming days on Gamecock 24/7. But with Dan, he's pretty content out in Kansas for various reasons. There's some family things, and he just didn't have the desire to come into the SEC like a lot of coaches. He was here in the league for a year as an assistant coach at LSU, and it just didn't. That wasn't the attraction that it is for most people. But I think most folks are probably most interested in the Scott Forbes bit of it, and I've been skeptical and remain skeptical of how seriously Forbes was considering the job. I mean, I do know that there are several factors that would lead him to consider taking the job, and I do think that he was very interested in it. He had a very lucrative offer, but it wasn't just about the. And when I say offer, I mean they discussed terms with him. They discussed terms with Kevin Schnall, and ultimately Schnall is who accepted the job. But it's pretty clear based on the events that Forbes kind of had first right of refusal, perhaps. But there's stuff beyond just his base salary that is much better at South Carolina than North Carolina. There's a much bigger operating budget, and there's a much bigger NIL budget. Above the cap budget, I guess is a better way of saying it, at South Carolina than there is North Carolina. And, the administration there has a lot of sports, and they've made some promises to Scott, over the years that maybe haven't all come completely to fruition in terms of, staff salary and that kind of thing. So, I do think there was real legitimate interest there for a variety of reasons, some being competitive. And for him, there is some allure to the SEC. And he would be working closely with a guy who was in the UNC dugout with him for a long time, in Tyson Lusk, who's now the chief of staff at South Carolina. He got his start at North Carolina as a student, but eventually is part of the baseball staff up there. And he's known and had a great relationship with Scott Forbes for many, many years. And, that was part of it there too with him. Ultimately, is he going to turn down the opportunity to stay at North Carolina with some enhancements? Probably not. And obviously didn't. But, it was a lot closer than what Kendall Rogers' tweet made it out to be. But it ended up being a two-horse race. And that's not to say other candidates were bad or they completely fell off or said no, or South Carolina. It just ended up being a two-horse race, and it wasn't going to get beyond Kevin.
And John, again, to your credit, that is something that you had posted many times on the message board at Gamecock 247, was that it would be a short list of candidates and it would not go very far down the list. That certainly came to fruition. The Board of Trustees is expected to approve Kevin Schnall's contract today at 4 p.m. Probably pitching coach Matt Williams' contract as well. Do you tell us who you anticipate coming over from Coastal Carolina with Kevin Schnall and Matt Williams?
Yeah, I certainly imagine Matt's contract is going before the board as well. I don't know why it wouldn't. Maybe they're going to do the assistants all at once. And I'll go ahead and head off that question at the pass. I don't know who. I don't know what other on-field assistant coaches are going to be with Kevin. Chad Oxendine, who's currently his recruiting coordinator, he may have an opportunity to come in that exact same role. He may come in a different role. He is up for the head coaching job at Coastal. So we'll see how that plays out. It's nothing with him is a given in any capacity, especially because of mainly because of the fact that he is up for the job at Coastal. But he's got 5 players who have committed already from Coastal Carolina who are definitely coming. There are several staff members beyond Matt who are coming. I haven't mentioned this yet on the Big Spurs. Well, not that it's huge breaking news, but Mickey Beach is coming. He's the director of baseball operations, so he's definitely coming. Matt Pepin, who's the director of analytics, who is certainly somebody who plays a huge role in Coastal's entire operation. He's definitely coming. Tyler Shoemaker, who's director of player development and recruiting at Coastal, he's coming. Michael Thompson, basically the strength and conditioning coach, he'll be here. Dylan Eskew, who, as everybody remembers, pitched at South Carolina, he'll be here. He's kind of Matt Williams' right-hand man. He has a director of pitching development title. And that's pretty much the size of it there on folks from Coastal who are definitely going to be joining him. That's the rundown of the staff. In terms of players, there's 5 guys who, as we're talking about it now, have publicly committed. A couple of left-handed pitchers, Hayden Johnson and Colby Richardson, a right-handed pitcher in Daniel Parker, catcher Bryce Estep, and infielder Walker Mitchell. All 3 of those guys have an opportunity to play a significant role next year and in the coming years for the Gamecocks. I can go into a little bit on each of those guys if you want me to. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me or not, but those guys are definitely coming, and there's probably 3 or 4 more who are probably going to come as well. Couple have gone into the portal with do not contact tags, and I know at least one is kind of looking around some as well. But there could be there's 9 that I know that they want. I don't know that all 9 will decide to come, and I haven't ruled out that there may be a guy out there that I don't know that they want to come ends up coming, or they may end up deciding to bring in another guy or 2. So I don't expect the number to grow over 10. It may not even be quite that high, but that'll be about the total number of players who end up coming.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about these guys. Hayden Johnson was awesome for them last year in their College World Series run. He had, I think, an arm or elbow injury. Maybe it was a shoulder. But he was scheduled to be a starting pitcher for them. I'm intrigued by him. And then Daniel Parker, who was a South Carolina commitment, and Terry Rooney watched him throw 10 pitches and said, "Nah, kid, you need to go someplace else," and then proceeded to have an excellent freshman season at Coastal. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Walker Mitchell the son of former Gamecock quarterback Alan Mitchell?
He is the late Alan Mitchell. The dogs are having a little bit of fun over here. I'm sorry, that's not me panting and making all those noises. But
everybody's excited about Gamecock baseball for the first time in a while, John.
Yeah, I've got a little
the animals.
Yeah, I've got a little foster dog over here, a little puppy who's scheduled to go out on Friday up to, I'm not sure where he's going. I'm not sure if this is going to be a Canadian puppy or where he's going, but they're having a little fun. But anyway, yes, he is the son of Alan Mitchell, who also played a little baseball with the Gamecocks as well.
He did.
And Walker was with the Canes back when I was still working some with the Canes. And, I asked him one day, I knew he was committed to Coastal and I knew how good of a player he was. And I said, why are you going to Coastal over, a South Carolina or a Clemson? Not that Coastal was a bad program. And he told me, and I remember the conversation. I remember where we were. He said, I just wanted to go to Coastal. He said, I love the program. I just wanted to go to Coastal. He said, the other schools talked to me and recruited me, but that's where I wanted to go. So, but he's got one more year left of college baseball, and he loves the coaching staff down there, and he gets to play really close to home, right for his final year, and put on the same uniform his dad did. And I think that'll be a really cool story. And, beyond just being a cool story, he's a good player. Yeah. Like, he's kind of the heartbeat of what Coastal Carolina and Kevin Schnall are all about. Great on-base percentage guy, really good defender, really tough player, leader. Like, he's going to be one of the most important players for the Gamecocks next season. And that doesn't mean he's going to hit in the 3-hole. I mean, he could very well be in that 8 spot in the order or 9 spot in the order or down in the bottom third of the lineup. But he's going to be one of the most important players on South Carolina's roster next year. He just kind of embodies everything that the program is going to be about. And, what better way to usher in a new era under a new coaching staff to show the rest of the team the way than bringing in Walker Mitchell, who has a great story, but also has, the talent to go with it.
No doubt. And obviously a culture guy. He understands nobody's going to have to tell him where to go to start practice because he's been in that program. He's a leader. Talk about how important getting Bryce Estep as the catcher and solidifying that spot for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, well, South Carolina doesn't have a catcher, so that makes him really important right now, right?
No doubt.
So, but yeah, like he's an older guy too, and he's a defensive guy, and you have to have a defensive guy on your roster to be able to catch because you have to be able to handle the pitching staff well. And there might be days where you want to put a guy out there who can really swing the bat and be an offensive guy from behind the plate. But you've got to have an option. You've got to have somebody out there who you are confident in, who can go out there and handle the pitching staff as well as he can and can receive as well as he can and can lead as well as he can. And, he has good OPS numbers, and he was off to a pretty good start on the season and played pretty well offensively for a lot of his junior season. He struggled at the end. I think he was 3 for 30 in the month of May, is a hitter. So he struggled late on, but he's known as a really good player from a really good catcher from a defensive standpoint, really handles those guys well, that pitching staff well. And, I love a guy like him who can provide something for you offensively, but does such a good job of making the pitching staff as good as they can be. You've got to have a guy like that. We'll see who else they recruit. I mean, they've got a great catcher signed as a part of the 2026 class who will be here in the fall if he doesn't get drafted. I would say that as we sit here today on June 10th, I would say that the chances are higher than not that he gets drafted high enough to sign. We'll see how that ends up going. And, it may be that South Carolina just makes him a big, big offer from a financial standpoint to come to school. We'll see. But they're going to have to bring in addition to Bryce, at least 2 more catchers, if not 3. You've got to have at least 3 catchers, usually 4 on your roster, or at least guys who are able to catch. 3 catchers and a 4th guy who you feel relatively comfortable putting out there in an emergency situation. But he's a big player. I'm not going to guarantee you he's an everyday starter next year, but he's a big player to have. And he's got a really good chance to start. Being a senior and having so many games under your college belt is beneficial too. And he was behind Caden Bodine for a couple of years, who was pretty darn good, first round draft pick, and so there's a lot there to like about that.
Can you? I mean, ideally, would Daniel Parker be a weekend starter next season?
No, I don't think
midweek guy.
Potentially. I don't think he's ready to be a weekend starter next year. He's probably a bullpen arm next year. I mean, I'm not going to rule anything out for the guy. He's just a sophomore and still growing and developing. So, we'll see what happens. But as we sit here in June, I think in February we're going to look at him as a key piece out of the bullpen. That can certainly change, but he's a guy who gets his fastball up to 97 miles an hour, and it's got a little bit of life to it, and he's got a breaking ball or a splitter that he gets some swings and misses on. His strikeout numbers weren't huge in his freshman year when you look at those compared to his innings pitched. But he's been pretty good, and he's going to continue to develop. I mean, he's got all the tools to be really good, really valuable piece.
No doubt. All right, so I want to talk more about players, but I want to go back just a bit and talk to us about Kevin Schnall, his coaching style, his demeanor, what Gamecock fans can expect from him. Obviously, I can't wait for the Florida series just because of the public comments about Kevin O'Sullivan at the regional. But talk to us about what South Carolina is getting in Kevin Schnall as a head coach.
I talked to a couple of travel coaches, major travel coaches, one with the Canes and one with the Dirtbags, two of the most prominent, travel teams, around these parts. One based out of Virginia who recruits from all over the country, one based out of North Carolina that is more regional than some of the others. But both of those guys, the first sentence out of their mouth was the guy is a winner. Both of those guys said the exact same thing. Two rival organizations, both with the exact same mindset on the guy. The guy's a winner. But attention to detail is the other thing that really stands out to me in terms of what Kevin Schnall is all about. Attention to detail, high intensity, work ethic, like those things all go hand in hand with what he's all about. You're going to see a team that drills really hard. Like they work really hard fundamentally on the finer points of baseball. And I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit more in terms of bunting and defensive work and all of those kind of things. But they drill on how to execute some of those little things, bat to ball contact, hit and run, steals, influencing the game, putting pressure on the opponent from that type. Like just I don't want to say just straight old school baseball, because they do a lot in the analytics department and devote a lot of time and resources and energy and understanding all of those types of things. So he's got some old school to him in terms of how he demands his players work and how he demands his staff works, and he embodies it himself. You can't demand that level of attention to detail and work without putting it forward yourself, and he puts forward it himself.
No doubt. So you mentioned one, possibly two on-field assistants coming. There's been a lot of talk about Mike Morrison, who I believe Kevin Schnall coached at Gilbert High School. He is the recruiting coordinator at Alabama. Obviously, they are in Omaha for the College World Series. What are your thoughts on Mike Morrison? Could you see that happening after they get back from Omaha, and any other names that you've heard that could be under consideration that you feel comfortable mentioning?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier I'm not going to have anything really on assistant coaches. I will say about Mikey specifically, like I wouldn't rule out something coming around with him. I know that he is very connected with Rob Vaughn at Alabama. Truly believes in everything that they're doing out there. Obviously, there's probably some allure to coming back home and working here. As you mentioned, he pitched at Gilbert, played at at Coastal Carolina. I think he was on staff there for a short time as well. I may be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that one. But deep ties with Kevin Schnall.
He was for 1 year. Yeah.
Yeah. Deep ties with Coastal and Kevin Schnall. And home is right down the road in Gilbert. So, I'm not going to rule anything out with him because he's obviously doing a great job at Alabama, who's headed to the College World Series. That was one of two teams in the SEC who had not been to Omaha since South Carolina had been to Omaha. Now it's only Missouri that has a longer Omaha drought than the Gamecocks. But that being said, Mikey wasn't in I still call him Mikey. That's what he used to go by. That's what I've known him for years. Now he's the more professional Mike Morrison. He's Mikey to me. I'd love to see Mikey and Nike, South Carolina Nike, on July 1st. But no, Mike was not on the initial in the initial group of guys. But I don't know that Kevin's going to be able to pull everybody he wanted to pull or thought he was going to be able to pull. The timing of things has thrown a wrench into some things, including hiring assistant coaches. So we'll see. I don't really have a whole lot to report on. I don't really have anything to report on assistant coaches at this time. But that's kind of the deal on Mikey, on Mike. And, I talked about Ox a little bit earlier. We'll see what happens with him in the head coaching position. If he doesn't get the job, whoever does get the job may want to keep him on staff as their lead guy, their lead recruiter. And, he might have that opportunity at South Carolina. It may be a little bit of a different role at South Carolina. That's all still kind of to be determined. So we'll see what happens with Ox, but he may end up being here and in the exact same role he was at Coastal, or other opportunities may call.
All right, so obviously South Carolina has had a lot of players enter the portal. There are still players on the roster. Can you talk to us about maybe the guys that have already entered the portal that South Carolina could or would like to bring back? And then, in your opinion, some of the guys that are currently on the roster that would be at top of mind to retain as well?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the list right now. There's 20 guys who have gone into the portal. One of them is one I know that they wanted to keep, Zach Russell, who ended up committing to Mississippi State. There's not a lot that they want to bring back. Will Craddock would be welcome back. Logan Prisco would be welcome back. Brandon Stone would be open to coming, or is somebody they would want back. I think Reese Moore is somebody they would want back. I think he's going to end up ultimately going to Nebraska, but he may wait on South Carolina. His brother who played at Iowa committed to Nebraska the other day, and there's been some talk about him playing with his brother again. Jake McCoy is somebody who they would probably or who they would want to have come back as well. The draft is a consideration there. Riley Goodman. But the time, if this had happened a week ago, there'd probably be a little bit more clarity, but a couple of guys have gone on some visits and talked to some other schools, and just because South Carolina wants them back doesn't mean that they'll come back. And you've got to balance some budget things, and you've got to balance, whether you think they fit your philosophy and your culture, and not everybody who wants to come back will have an opportunity to, and we'll see how all that ends up shaking out. But they've reached out to everybody that they want to reach out to, and we'll see how it all comes together. Not everybody that they reach out to is going to come back, and there's going to be people who they don't want to reach out, or who they aren't going to reach out to, who want to come back. So there's still some things to be determined, and I'll say this too, just because you don't get somebody now or don't want somebody now, it doesn't mean that in a week that changes. There's more players going into the portal. There's more players committing. You miss on guys. What's true today, I mean, it's recruiting. I mean, and it's always been this way. What's true today may not be true tomorrow, and what's true today may not be true next week. So we'll see. All of that stuff is kind of fluid. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I think I've given you a pretty good list of the guys that they have prioritized and would like to have back.
No doubt. How about outside of the catcher you mentioned, who is draftable, that is signed with South Carolina, guys that are in Coastal's high school class, and maybe some guys that are in South Carolina's high school class? Yeah,
I don't think anybody in Coastal's class. I asked about that a week or so. I say a while. A week ago feels like it's been a while at this point in time. But I asked about Coastal's class about a week ago, and was told more than likely not. Going back to what I just said a few minutes ago, like it all can change depending on who you think you can get, who you can't. We'll see on that. I'm trying to pull up right now just so I don't forget anybody's name on who's here we go on who's currently committed and who's already gone. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in the 26 class who have signed, who have scheduled to come in. 2 of them are JUCO guys, and 4 high school guys. I haven't heard. I'll just be honest. I haven't really heard much on any of those guys in terms of, coming or going. If they're still committed, I'm sure that all 6 still want to come to South Carolina. Now, I don't know that they are going to come in and already start and set afire an already small class. I mean, they may just go ahead and rock with what they've got and try to develop them. But there are also some pretty good players in there too. Walker Cox is from Easley, really projectable guy, somebody who I think Matt Williams could really develop. Brady Stewart's a number 208 player in the country, left-handed hitting guy with a little bit of power and some athleticism. Mentioned Elaine Gomez Gadino, that's the catcher. He's a top 50 player in the country, and a pitcher from Virginia, and Aaron Dirks. And a couple of JUCO guys too. Brock Clayton, who's more of an outfielder than a catcher, but he can catch a little bit in a pinch. So I guess South Carolina technically didn't have 0 catchers. He's probably your third best option is a catcher if you're on a good team. And then Lance Hartley, a pitcher from junior college too. I haven't heard much on what the new staff plans on doing with those guys. I would imagine that they would keep all of those guys, and all of those guys would want to continue to come.
Good stuff. So before I let you go, this baseball tournament, starting with the regionals, it was like a March Madness. I mean, walk-off games, dramatic endings, big upsets. You had the top 2 national seeds lose, 3 of the top 8, 7 of the top 16. And now we're into the College World Series. 5 teams from the SEC, John, one side of the bracket, 4 SEC teams. Ole Miss is on the other side of the bracket with West Virginia, Troy, and North Carolina. Just your thoughts on the tournament, from the games that you got to see to the upsets and now ultimately to the 8 teams that are in Omaha.
Well, I know this probably sounds weird, but I don't usually get to watch a ton of the baseball tournament. Usually I'm so focused on covering the Gamecocks and whatever they've got going on, and South Carolina usually makes it. Obviously that hasn't been the case, as often here lately. So I don't usually get to watch and follow the wildness as closely as many of the others. Last year I was just done with college baseball. I'll be honest. I hardly watched any of it last year, but I locked in and watched a ton of it this year. And it's been an incredible tournament thus far. And you mentioned all the upsets and comebacks and all of that stuff. And, it's all true. All of that stuff's happened. And a couple of the biggest teams were knocked out. But then you look at what's in Omaha, and you see a 45-win Virginia team, and you see a 50-win North Carolina team, and you see a couple of SEC programs that have just been phenomenal this year, to include Georgia at 51 wins, the most of any team in the country right now. And you do have a couple of sleepers in there, like an Oklahoma who made a nice little run. And you've got that Troy team that's sitting there at 38-30. Like, you've had some crazy upsets, but you've also got some of the biggest power players in the country. So I think that you are going to see a phenomenal College World Series. I don't know who's going to win. I mean, somebody asked me the other day, and I told them that I have North Carolina beating Texas in the championship series. I mean, who knows? This has been such a crazy tournament. It could end up being Troy versus Georgia, and Troy be like probably one of the biggest Cinderellas, if not the biggest Cinderella to ever win. It was Fresno State back in 2008, I think. Yeah. And they beat Georgia for the championship that year. So maybe it'll be Troy being the biggest Cinderella to ever win it and beating Georgia again in the championship series. That'd be something fun, wouldn't it? But with the way this tournament has gone, I got no idea how this thing's going to play out. But it's been a phenomenal 2 weekends of watching baseball, and I certainly would see it as a fitting end to have a great College World Series as well.
John, I can't thank you enough for being on with us today. Great stuff. I know your plate is full. You got a lot of stuff ahead. No rest for the weary. But congratulations on owning this coaching search, and for all you do at Gamecock 247. And always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us today, John.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Keith.
Yep. All right. That was John Whittle. All things Gamecocks, especially baseball. Nobody was on this coaching search like John Whittle. Let's go back to Gamecock 247 and Alex Jones. We're going back to back with the 24/7 guys that cover the Gamecocks. Alex, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Great to follow up Mr. John Whittle there, and looking forward to it.
So it looks like you've been wearing your big floppy hat. You don't have too much sunburn from covering summer camps. Hopefully some of them have at least been inside. This is the summer of Shane. It's kind of been a little bumpy ride thus far, but still 2 big recruiting weekends coming up. Gamecocks lost their secondary commitment. Jannard Albright flipped to FSU. I don't know why you would flip from South Carolina to Florida State. It's not like they're winning 11 games down there anymore. Gamecocks lost Amari Fountain early, but the good news is you still have top targets that are coming in, and if anybody can go get guys, it's Torian Gray.
Yeah, I mean, that's the position where, I mean, you've seen it in the past at South Carolina where, they maybe, lose a guy that was in the class early, but then they go and pretty much immediately offer a guy or turn the heat up on another guy. And some of those guys have, become big-time players at South Carolina. I mean, you think back to last year, like Cassie Barnes was the name that was really kind of, you started to hear a little bit about heading into the senior season, but he got in on that official visit, and South Carolina really got in there early with him. And Torian Gray's just really good at identifying the talent early and then building those relationships. So that's one where Amari Fountain I was really high on. Really, both of these guys, I was really high on that they lost in that secondary. But it's one of those positions where you kind of trust South Carolina to go and find those guys pretty quickly with the track record that Torian Gray has.
No doubt. Well, certainly South Carolina's taken a hit on their board at defensive end. But, I mean, they were recruiting all 4- and 5-star guys that all the heavyweights were in on. And rightfully so with the players that South Carolina has been producing at that position. So Frederick Ards from Orlando Jones, he picks Texas A&M. Desmond Malpress, he visited that first week in May. I think South Carolina wanted to wait on some of these other guys. He goes to Clemson and commits. Talk to us about this whole Jaden Bryant. I mean, he shows up to camp in the middle of the week to hang out with the coaches. He brought his cleats. I don't know if he worked out or not. He moves his South Carolina visit up. It was supposed to happen last weekend, June 5th. And then after he sets that visit, the next day he flips to Miami. Talk to us about Jaden Bryant. I mean, this commitment seems so wild. I don't think it's I think there's a long way to go there.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild 24 hours there. I mean, that was the first Shane Beamer camp session of the summer, and he was there kind of hanging out with the staff, and they did a little bit of a workout and things like that, and then hung out for the rest of the camp. And I think you really thought South Carolina, you can see like, all right, South Carolina's got a legitimate shot here to flip Jaden Bryant, and as I said, he hung around for a camp, and then the next morning announced that he was moving his official visit up to this past weekend, and you really started to think South Carolina had a legitimate shot, and then later in the day he ends up flipping to Miami, and didn't quite see that one coming. I mean, he was coming off a Miami official visit, but we'll see with this one. It could be one of these cases where to keep an eye on as the season goes, and I think that's probably going to be the case for a lot of these guys that we talk about here coming up in this class. That South Carolina, it just needs to go out there and win games this upcoming season, and that's when you really see some of these guys maybe come back around.
All right, and so LSU loses Jaden Bryant. They host 5-star KJ Green from Stone Mountain, a guy South Carolina has been prominently in the mix for. And I guess they just shift that NIL money from Jaden Bryant to KJ Green. He commits to LSU. So this weekend, South Carolina has 2 guys coming in. Well, KJ Green is still listed as visiting, as is Swainsboro 4-star linebacker Jabari Smith, who's committed to Florida. Are you expecting either one of those guys to visit this weekend?
Not expecting either of those guys to be in.
All right, so that would leave Chris Whitehead, 6'4.5", 230, a 4-star guy, the number 1 prospect in the state of Virginia. He's visiting. And then on the 19th, Marquise Evans, 6'3.5", 235 from Hoover, Alabama is visiting. Are there any other defensive ends that could be visiting, or is this board going to be just evolving throughout the season?
I think it's going to be one that's evolving throughout the season. See who kind of pops up on the radar. See, who can maybe get back on around to for guys who's already committed. But you got your shot with Chris Whitehead this weekend, who really, really good prospect. He got from the Virginia area that South Carolina got on here pretty recently. And, I think, now if you're South Carolina, it kind of looked like, a few weeks ago, you're going to have a ton of these top edge guys in this weekend. Like KJ Green was supposed to be in. Jaden Bryant was originally supposed to be in. But now I think you can have your whole attention under a guy like Chris Whitehead, who I think we have as like number 38 overall player in the country right now. And so a really, really good prospect, guy that, Virginia Tech's also in on in some other schools. But I think now that you're seeing this board kind of evolve the way it is, he's going to become, he already was one of the top targets, but now he's going to be, have all the attention this weekend from the coaching staff. And, that's one room that I think you just kind of continue to watch to see what happens as the season goes on.
No doubt. All right. So last weekend, South Carolina had 3 uncommitted prospects on campus. Let's start with the big one, Nate Kamba, 4-star defensive tackle from Charlotte Corvian community. This is a guy Travian Robertson has been in on, 6'4", 300. John Archer from Fayetteville, the 4-star defensive tackle commitment, was on campus as well. Kamba will visit Auburn this weekend and then decide, Alex, how do the Gamecocks sit in this recruitment?
Yeah, I think they came into this past weekend in a good spot for him, and I think that, was only kind of reassured this weekend that they're in a good spot. And, you'll have to kind of survive Auburn this weekend. Auburn's recruiting really well right now with Alex Golesh going into his first season. He's going to, wanted to let the process play out. He's going to go to Auburn this weekend, but I think a decision may not come, much longer after that. It could be, end of June, maybe early July, but I think probably somewhere June. These next few weeks you'll hear a decision. But I've mentioned it a few times on the message board on Gamecock 24/7. Like he's built a really strong relationship with Travian Robertson. I think that's going to play a huge role in this, and probably is one of the best relationships he has in this recruitment, if not the best. And I think that's going to play a huge part come decision time. I mean, he kind of mentioned it, talking to him this weekend, how much they talk, basically talking every day. And that's something even I picked up on in the spring, when I went out to talk to him at Corvian Community. Like, you could already hear how strong that bond was. And I think, Travian Robinson's done a pretty incredible job here in these last few classes of building those relationships. Like John Archer, you mentioned, he's another one that played a huge role in. And so, I think South Carolina's in a good spot. You just kind of got to survive this Auburn weekend. But, I think just the relationships he has, the comfortability, the proximity, this from home for him, I think it's going to play a huge role in this one. So I think they're in a good spot. Just see if you can survive this weekend at Auburn.
All right. So not only Nate Kamba in D-line heaven, next weekend, you've got Antoine McCoy, a borderline 4-star defensive tackle from St. Paul, North Carolina, who will visit. Of course, May the 1st, Seth Tillman, the 4-star defensive tackle from South Point in Rock Hill. He visited. You've got to survive the Georgia and Clemson visits with him. But, I mean, this is already a room that may be the most talented room, along with the wide receiver room on campus currently. And Travian Robertson got a really good shot of going back-to-back with 2 4-star guys from the Tar Heel State, and potentially could add more to that as well.
Yeah, well, starting with Antoine McCoy, like he's probably one of my favorites in this class, honestly, so far. Like he's one that, when I visited with him this spring, same kind of trip when I went up there to see Nate Kamba, like he's, came away really impressed with him. It's probably one of the more impressive guys I saw throughout all my travels this spring. And just a guy that, has continued to work and, has continued to show improvement. But, I mean, he's one that, from a recruitment standpoint, I think we can probably throw this in there with Tillman. Like, Georgia's also very involved in here, and that's going to be probably I think with McCoy, it's a Gamecocks versus Bulldogs battle, and getting him in this weekend, and Georgia having already had their OV, I think is going to play a pretty key role. Now it's just, can you get enough momentum going? Because I think Georgia did make a very strong impression on that OV. But, again, Travian Robinson's another one, had built really strong relationship with this guy. So you kind of get you a chance to shoot your shot this weekend. And, if they're able to land Antoine McCoy, that's a really strong North Carolina defensive line haul, again, coming off of having Aiden Harris and Noah Clark in this past class.
No doubt. So a lot of the linebackers on South Carolina's boards are committed to other schools. Jackson Ross from Hammond, the son of former Gamecock basketball player David Ross, he made his official visit. He's already visited Vanderbilt. I think he visits Texas Tech this weekend. Obviously, you don't want him going to the casino or hanging out on the online gambling sites with Brendan Sorsby. But obviously, he's a legacy. He's hometown guy. But he has been open to Texas Tech. Do you think it boils down to South Carolina and Texas Tech on Ross? And where do the Gamecocks sit today in his recruitment?
I think it is Gamecocks versus Red Raiders battle for Jackson Ross. And, Texas Tech, and this is one where they actually got in on him pretty early in this recruitment. It sounds like it's one where they kind of just recently offered and built an OV. But they got in on him early, just as South Carolina did. But I think the official visit this weekend went really well. And I think, it's another one that South Carolina's in a good spot for. But, with Texas Tech, you just kind of never know. They do a really good job in recruiting. And I think they're going to have a good pitch for him, and I think there's legit interest there on his side too in Texas Tech. I think it's just not one of those just going out there for a trip or things like that. Like, I legitimately think this could be a Gamecocks and Red Raiders battle, but I think I do like right now coming off the OV where the Gamecocks are with him.
All right, and then North Oconee High School defensive back Kelvin Millington, who I was told measured 6'4", on the official visit. He is involved with Virginia Tech, and I think he visits Texas Tech either this weekend or next weekend. Where is he on South Carolina's board? Obviously, at corner, you have Joshua Dobson and Davian Jones. Even though he's listed as a safety, I think he will be a corner or a nickel. Is Kelvin Millington a priority prospect for South Carolina?
I think that's going to be kind of an interesting spot to watch, a position to watch here these next few weeks, just with who you still have coming in with Joshua Dobson there being, one of your top overall targets, and then one of your top cornerback target. But then also Davion Jones is kind of, I think he's listed as a safety by 24/7 Sports, but kind of in that cornerback nickel mold for South Carolina. So you got those two guys coming in next weekend. So I think right now those three are the three to watch at that cornerback spot. And I think it's one of those where, you see kind of how it goes with Texas Tech this weekend with Millington, because that's another one where they were in pretty early with Millington as well. I think even before South Carolina, they offered Millington. So I think you got to kind of watch to see what happens there. But I think, made a strong impression this weekend, but now it's just how does that board kind of fill out, with Davion Jones and Joshua Dobson still coming in, because, I think it's one of those, right, you're taking those two regardless, but now how does that kind of fit in with Millington?
No doubt. All right, safety Robert Gathers III from Charlotte, being recruited by some schools as a linebacker. Updated height and weight is 6'2", 212. We know Torian Gray and Clayton White are not averse to big safeties. Robert Gathers III, I think at this point, kind of a critical guy for South Carolina at that safety position.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much here with Robert Gathers. I know, according to Hale McGranahan, he's not coming in this weekend for an official visit. So I think it's one of those where he's been trending to Tennessee for a little while now.
I missed that one.
Yeah, he's been trending to Tennessee for a little while now, and I think that's it's going to be Tennessee, Georgia type of thing potentially there.
All right, well, we'll mark him off. All right, so the biggest news of the week is Bluffton 4-star wide receiver Amari Patterson, who Hale McGranahan, tip of the hat to him, who has been out front with this recruitment all along. He has canceled his visit to Florida. He's visited Georgia and Georgia Tech. He will visit South Carolina this weekend and then announce 1 week from Saturday on June the 20th. I mean, how big is it to get Patterson in for the visit? And then, going into the visit, how do you think the Gamecocks are stacking up here?
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting recruitment with Amari Patterson, a guy that has been in state and been one of the targets there. But I think South Carolina was a little behind everybody else in offering there. And then Georgia was involved pretty early, Florida was involved pretty early, Georgia Tech was involved pretty early. But I think they've done a pretty good job of getting into this race. And I think now getting him in this weekend before he announces on June 19th, I think is the date when he's announcing. I think you get your shot with him. Now the question is going to be, can you do enough to overcome a Georgia who has maybe the stronger, longer theory here with him? But I think it's one where you have your shot for an in-state guy, and South Carolina's typically done a pretty good job with those guys under Shane Beamer. So you get your shot, but this weekend, but a really good wide receiver. Like I think he's one of the more intriguing guys where he's kind of become a guy that from a 4-star perspective, like he's really kind of quickly risen the rankings, and he was at Bluffton, and really good receiver. I really like his size and speed and what he can bring, but you'll see what they can do this weekend. That's, of all the guys, Chris Whitehead's going to be a guy that everybody's going to keep an eye on as well as Antoine McCoy. But really, I think Amari Patterson is one of the more intriguing guys this weekend.
I mean, no doubt about it. So with McCoy coming in and Patterson, I get offensive tackle Clayton Lee, 6'7", 290 from Callahan, Florida. He's scheduled to come in. I mean, a lot of guys that were scheduled to come in, it doesn't look like they're coming in. So a smaller visit weekend, which, certainly gives Shane Beamer more one-on-one time with these guys. And then next weekend, Dobson, Segura, the running back from Burns, hopefully he doesn't commit to LSU and makes it in. Davian Jones and Nate Carson and Marquise Evans. South Carolina has 2 interior offensive linemen. I think now you want to go out and get a couple of tackles. Clayton Lee, they like a massive guy, 6'7", 290. And then next weekend, Nate Carson right up the road in Irmo, 6'4", 270.
Yeah, and you also still got guys out there, especially for you look at that first weekend too, from an offensive line perspective. Like Stafford Willis was a guy that South Carolina did a really good job with on that first official visit. I think I actually saw he got offered by Alabama yesterday. He's going to take an official visit there, but I think South Carolina still remains in a good spot there. But yeah, I think from an offensive line board, like you've seen, and Dewey Young, that's another one that's probably throw out there that was in that first weekend that South Carolina did a nice job with. And I think, from an offensive line perspective, you've seen them under Randy Clements and Jason Smith and these guys. Like they've cast a really wide net in this offensive line class. And I think you're still seeing some 27 offensive linemen come in for camps too. And that's another thing I should mention too. Like even still got 2 whole weeks of camp left where these boards can continue to evolve. I mean, we've seen in the past where guy comes in on a Wednesday for a camp, gets an offer, and he's back for a weekend official visit. So still things like that could happen. But with the offensive line, I think it's going to be interesting to see who they could get from a camp perspective. It's going to be anybody who lands that offer and gets an official visit weekend. But I think Clayton Lee's been a guy that I'm interested to see how it goes with him this weekend. Like kind of been an under the radar target, I think, for South Carolina, where you haven't heard much about him from his interview standpoint. But I think South Carolina got in on here at the beginning of the year and done a really nice job there. And I think he's got some other schools still going there, but I think it's a big official visit for him this weekend.
No doubt. So, Alex, let's kind of pan out and take a 30,000-foot view here. How big of an impact do you think the 4-8 season is? Also 4 new full-time coaches on staff, losing a coach to LSU and Sterling Lucas that had great relationships that he had built over the course of 3 years with a lot of these edge guys, and then almost an entirely new offensive staff. I just don't think people realize that it takes time when guys come in on staff for them to acclimate to their territory, to build, long-standing relationships with prospects. When Travian came in, it was tough sledding, but now look at him. I mean,
that's the example I was getting ready to use. Like, look at Travian Robertson, where you saw what some people were thinking about with his recruitment or his recruiting, 2-3 years ago. But I mean, he's kicked into gear. I mean, I think everybody knew he was going to be fine once those relationships got built. And look at him now. And to your point, like, I think 4-8 is playing a pretty big role in some of this. I think that's you have to imagine other coaching staffs that are recruiting these same guys. They're throwing that out there. Like, I think it's something where I said early on in the show where you just got to get into the season. You win, they'll come. That's I think that's the type of thing you have to take with this. Like, you start winning some games, you can get some of these guys who maybe if you were coming off an 8-4 season that you're able to land this summer, but you get them in this weekend or you get them in over the season, you get some wins going, then you can start maybe talking about some flips or things like that. But you always kind of talk about the previous season always affects that next recruiting class. It doesn't affect the current one because of those relationships are always built. So I think it's just something South Carolina has to deal with and has to battle on the recruiting trail right now. But it's going to be interesting to see just how can build some early momentum this upcoming season, because that early momentum can really get some guys in the building for some of those big middle of the SEC season games where maybe you can shoot your shot again with some of those guys.
No doubt, Alex. Great stuff as always. I can't thank you enough for being on. And the good news for Shane Beamer and staff is they have a very talented roster. They had an outstanding recruiting class. You're bringing in an Elite 11 quarterback who's already been on campus in Landon Duckworth, wide receiver room, running backs. South Carolina will have the most experienced offensive line group in the country as far as number of snaps, and a very talented defense as well. And so that sets the table, and it is a long time to December. Let's remember this time last year, you had one of your 5-star recruits in Julian Walker who had committed to Michigan, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, long way to go till these guys start signing in December, and it's just I think if you're South Carolina, just take care of business on the field, and everything else will pan out.
No doubt, Alex. Great stuff. We'll be following your work on Gamecock 247. Thanks for being with us. Be well, my friend, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Absolutely, always enjoy being on. See you next time.
Yep. All right, that was Alex Jones from 24/7 Sports. Couple of notes. Asia Wilson became the fastest WNBA player in history to 6,000 points, passing Diana Taurasi, who is the all-time leading scorer in the WNBA. She beat her to 6,000 points by, I think, 13 games, and Breonna Stewart by 15 games. And Dawn Staley and Asia Wilson both listed in Time Magazine top 100 figures in sports as icons. And the switch to Nike is 3 weeks away. Of course, South Carolina women's basketball will be featured prominently with the Asia Wilson line. Congratulations to her. She currently leads the WNBA in scoring yet again. And block shots. She's up there in rebounds as well. Asia Wilson, the greatest player in the world. And Dawn Staley, certainly right now, sitting atop the women's basketball landscape with the deepest, most talented roster in the country coming up for this season. Kelsey Andrews is with Team USA in the FIBA AmeriCup. They won their game over Argentina. I think it was 113-47. She had 5 points. Everybody played. Several recruiting targets for the Gamecocks on that roster as well. And outside of her, Allie Turnabes and Justine Lubens, who I believe both of them are in France, everybody else should be on campus. Jersey Robinson, Olivia Edwards, all of those players from the recruiting class and all of the returning players, and Jordan Lee from the transfer portal. So that will be a wrap for us today on Gamecock Pod Live. Join us next week. We'll be back same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, God bless, go Gamecocks, and be well.